problem, but worked that shit out, and here I am.
All right. Well, hey everybody, we're live now. Hey everybody. So we got Ephrom, Josine here, and we also got Angry Pepe, the host of Kyrgyzstan News Network. Say hi, everybody.
Hello.
How's it going?
All right,
Okay.
and as well as the regular members of the Kool Kapitalist Kids. With the exception of the conservatarian, he's just some bitch we don't know. Anyway, so we're going to debate with Ephrom, Josine here, and would you like to explain exactly what your position here is, Ephrom, Josine?
Okay. Basically, I believe in a system that has some amounts of socialism and social programs. However, I do believe that about 70% of the time, 80% of the time-ish, free markets can benefit. However, I don't feel it's the case 100% of the time like anarcho-capitalism paints it as.
Well, it is 100% of the time, and I'll explain exactly why a mixed economy cannot work. A mixed economy cannot work because when you have the government providing funding through social programs, what happens is you artificially inflate the demands of the industry by making everything more expensive. When the government artificially
That's not necessarily true, because in countries
when the
like
government
healthcare, for instance,
I
what if
saw
the
it happen
government
with American
negotiates the
universities pretty
prices?
clearly.
What if the government is negotiating prices like they do with healthcare in countries like Canada? There, healthcare is cheaper than it is in the United States because the government is helping negotiate it.
Yeah, no, it's cheaper, but the problem with single payer healthcare, most of those people, they don't even use their healthcare. So, back to what I was saying really quickly, the problem back to the original point, the problem with mixed economies is that when you have an artificially inflated demand brought into the industry, that means that in order for private companies to compete with the government, since the government has artificially inflated the amount of money that they're going to receive, that means that you cannot the private companies have to raise their prices in order to compete, which means that the only option is going to be government programs. So it's not really, mixed economies are not really mixed economies. It's really just authoritarian economies or freer market economies. And the other thing with healthcare companies is that when they are private, we know objectively that you used Canada as an example. Well, the fact of the matter is that they have very, very poor quality healthcare in Canada,
But
and
they are living longer than us.
it takes 3 months to get a bottle of painkillers.
And
It's
they
not
are still
their
living
healthcare.
longer. That's the thing. I'll compare Canada's life expectancy to the United States right now. The United States' life
You're
expectancy.
negating a pretty important factor, though, in that is that we are free enough to live shitty. We're free enough to chain smoke cigarettes and drink a bottle of whiskey a night and go kill ourselves on jet skis and shit. So, I mean, we also have the choice.
The other thing,
Now you're just changing the topic. We were talking about waiting to get the healthcare. Now you're
But
talking
you
about
said
free.
why do Americans die faster than Canadians, and you're saying it's because Canada has better health care, and I'm going to say it's because Americans are fatter and
I'm going to point this
lazier.
out. I'm going to point this out. Shelly D, an actual Canadian in the chat, is saying it doesn't take you 3 months to fill a bottle of pills. Just saying.
okay, well, Shelly D is a liar because it does. So anyway.
Okay, well, he's an actual Canadian citizen. I don't think you are.
Okay, and there are studies, empirical proof that shows that it does take an incredibly long time. Not only does it take an incredibly long time, but there are selective waiting lists based on identity and social class. So not only...
Well, yeah, but a lot of those also based on whether or not the procedure is necessary.
It's called prioritized waiting lists, and no, they're not. They're for the same procedure. Somebody who goes in with the same condition as somebody else is going to get selectively treated quicker than the other person simply based on their identity or their social class. So literally, not only is the quality of healthcare in decline, and not only does it take forever, but also it is literally a system which is less equal than a free market system. Because a free market system, all you have to do is go in there and ask for healthcare. And not only will that be the case, but healthcare companies are self-serving. That's exactly why they provide better healthcare than a single-payer option. The problem here...
By the way, Esoteric, do you have any citations on how long it does take? Because, again, the Canadian from earlier is still saying that's not the case, and he wants to see some citations on that.
All right, let me look one up really quickly.
Because I can show you that Canadians still live 3 years longer than the United States.
And I can show you that over 90% of Canadians mostly don't even get health care because of how long the waiting lists are. And even, you know, that's the thing. You keep saying that Canadians live longer than people in the United States. Well, the problem with that is that what exactly do you have to believe that that has anything to do with their health care?
Well, the fact that the fact that they're living longer at least has to show that they have something they're doing over us. And while you're not saying, and while I'm not saying that's always healthcare, denying that that's at least a factor is idiotic. It's ludicrous.
I won't deny it's a factor, but I'll say that I have Canadian friends and American friends, and the lifestyle in Canada and the lifestyle in America is 100% different, and that is a major contributor.
Okay, how is it different?
It just seems like the lifestyle in Canada is a little bit healthier than it is mainstream status quo wise than America. Unless people, and I'm just saying that does contribute to it as well. Why you would live 3 years longer on a grand scale like a lifetime. On average.
If their health care was so much better, wouldn't it peter out though? Or so much worse, wouldn't it peter out though?
There's no healthcare system in the world that's going to cure people that walk around and eat Big Macs for every meal, man. That's part of America. That's great. I love that shit. But there is a cost to it, and that's overall we might die 3 years faster than a Canadian. That's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, really, if you're going to weigh out the options between being forcibly stolen from, as opposed to
but appeal to emotions are bad.
Choosing to enjoy your life and, you know, having better food, enjoying yourself, but then dying a few years earlier. Compare that with being stolen from and having shitty healthcare. Well, then I'm pretty sure that the former is the better of those two options.
Yep, if it only shaves off 3 years to be free.
I don't get about anarcho-capitalism. You guys claim you value property rights, right?
Right.
So why doesn't the government have property rights?
Pretty much
because
any
the
American
government doesn't own any property. The government does not own anything. It's only capable of redistributing anything, redistributing things. Plus, the government.
So, like, if I run a town, let's say I run a city, or not, so let's say I run about 2 blocks.
Hold on. The problem also is that the government, it's a mythical entity. The belief in government is the only thing that really exists. For example, you know, the belief in statism is pretty much the only thing that exists. You wouldn't argue that because there are Christians in the world, there's a God, would you?
Well, no.
Well, and that's the thing.
However,
statism is the inherent.
Good thing I'm not a statist then.
You are a statist because you believe that a government exists and you believe that the government has power. And you also believe that it has the right to rule.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Can you name one society that doesn't have a government that worked? I dare you. Because I can name a few that failed.
And that is an incredibly crappy argument. Just because something that is proposed to exist has not existed, that does not mean that
But they have existed and they failed.
Yeah, communist societies, anarcho-communist, anarcho-socialist.
Good thing I'm not a communist then.
I never said that I was a communist.
So
I hate to break this up, but volunteers in the comments. He's not able to get into the link. He may need to invite him.
Oh.
No, here's the thing. You're saying it was because I can name governmentless societies that failed. You know, post-Gaddafi Libya failed. Post-Saddam Hussein Iraq
Oh my
failed
god, dude.
miserably.
Post-Gaddafi Libya was not an anarchist society. It was a society that became destabilized because their government collapsed. You know the difference between a stateless society and a society which is collapsed because the government failed, don't you?
Well, you're going to have the government fail in this country in order to have an anarcho-capitalist society. That's just
No,
inevitable.
you don't. All you have to do is you need to slowly abolish the areas which the government controls in order to not destabilize those commodities in society. So, for example, private security. And you have to do it slowly or else it will destabilize everything. You've got to let the market take over, and then you can eventually get to the point where the government doesn't have a purpose to exist anymore. Since society is functioning completely independent of government, then you can simply abolish it. So no.
That sounds a lot like a Marxist saying that they're going to get rid of government over time.
No, because Marxists are revolutionary.
Dude, you do realize that Marxism is pro-government?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I could be wrong on this, but I believe one of the things Marx said in his writing was that a government would slowly be abolished as people become more generous over time.
Yeah, well, that's the other problem. I mean, Marx didn't invent Lysenkoism, but that's exactly the problem that they ran into when the Communist Party took over the USSR after the 1917 revolution. Was it 13 or 17? Whatever, it doesn't fucking matter. The point is,
I think it was 1917.
I think it was 1917 too. But the point is that it wasn't even a year into it, and Joseph Stalin himself said that communism defies human nature. And that's why he invented Lysenkoism. And so that's the problem with Marxism, is that it cannot exist naturally. People cannot exist naturally. People have to be modified in order to have a communist society work. And that's basically what Lysenkoism was. It was a pseudoscience that...
Well, what makes you think that people wouldn't have to be modified to get an ANCAP society to work? That's my question.
Because it's not based on any rights to anything. It's based on rights in a negative context. And that's really the main difference here, is that... Okay. Well, the problem with rights in a positive context is that you are demanding things. Rights only exist in a negative context, and the only things which constitute as rights, this being the case, are life and autonomy, along with everything which results from autonomy, because these are the only things which every person has inherently and that cannot be restricted naturally, but can only be taken with an initiation of force. So that's the main difference between anarcho-capitalism.
No, yeah, in that sense, I mean a stateless society or a governmentless society like anarcho-capitalists propose, I don't think could work without changing human nature, because hierarchies form naturally.
That's the problem. And no, well, of course there are people who act violently. Yes, there are sociopaths who naturally will act violently, but you know, that argument could be used against pretty much any system. Oh, that system's not going to work because people could step up, be violent, and take over the entire system. Well, the problem with that, first of all, is that anarcho-capitalism, there's not really a platform for somebody to violently take over and to violently dictate. And honestly, using your logic, wouldn't you think that oh, this society is bad because somebody could possibly take over, wouldn't you logically conclude that anarcho-capitalism is the best alternative? Because as previously pointed out, there's not really an open seat to authority under anarcho-capitalism,
How?
as opposed to a statist system where there's a fucking government. There's a fucking government where all you have to do is simply get elected. In anarcho-capitalism, you would have to overthrow society, first of all, which good fucking luck with that, because everybody owns a gun.
Here's the thing. In a representative democracy system, you have to, in some way, convince enough people that, that guy's not going to ruin him. That guy's not going to ruin a society. In an anarcho-capitalist society, all I'd need to do is have the most AK-47s.
Yeah,
I'll be the best at using an AK-47.
You do realize that AKs are not very accurate, right? I think
And
that maybe an
also-
M16 or an AR-15 would
Yeah,
probably
they
look
have
better.
1 feet of
It's
jam.
statism.
I'm not a gun guy. I don't know.
What if right now I were to try and organize an army, then I could overthrow the government? You can make the same argument against statism. Oh, statism doesn't work because people could get together, form an army, and take over the government, then they're rulers. So what is
Well, no, my society has a military that could actively prevent that from happening in case
So
it was
does
the wrong hands
anarcho-capitalism.
doing it.
Not only does anarcho-capitalism have a military, but they have hundreds of militaries, and they're all private, so they're working specifically for customers to do the best that they possibly can to protect their society.
Okay, well, here's my question. You see, if a military is privatized, what's stopping me from buying a 200, 300, 400-man militia if I have 2.5 billion to spare, and then creating my own dictatorship?
The fact that everybody has a gun, there's private security services that would stop you, and there's hundreds of other militias which will come in and kick your ass.
Well,
Yeah, it's just like if someone were to try that now.
What
it's
if I
just we
could buy
fight
them
to the
off?
death.
What if I can buy them off or make a deal with them?
Then you
Yeah.
win.
So you're talking about
That's where
buying like the
arguments-
whole society.
That's where arguments against anarcho-capitalism start to drift into absurdist hypotheticals, because that you're seriously going to sit there and try and claim that you are going to overthrow and just absolutely destroy everyone, every police service, every military service, in a world where everybody has military-grade weaponry and is against you simultaneously.
What if I buy them off? What if I can buy as many people as I can off?
What if you can't?
Then what is stopping me from creating a dictatorship saying, okay, you guys in my army, you guys get treated okay, I
That's
guess.
the thing. You're not going to buy every single military. That's just a ridiculous hypothetical, because
But what if I buy enough to the point where I can crush every military that I couldn't buy?
that's the problem with these arguments. Here, a monopoly can happen because it requires, first of all, the state uses force to influence trade, and also because of things like intellectual property and regulation, it makes it basically impossible for people to start up a business unless their business is a smash hit. Under anarcho-capitalism, all you have to do in order to consider yourself a business is to simply slap a sign on your front door that says, "Now we're open."
Okay, well, one, I agree there is too much red tape on small businesses, to some extent. I don't think all regulations are bad, but I do think we have too much red tape in general. But here's my question:
The thing with
what is stopping me from creating a business and say I put something in my food, for instance, and then just selling it to people and them not knowing?
the
I
fact that
Well, what is
that
that thing you're putting in the food?
everyone would know that it's your food that's poisoning them, so you would get arrested.
And ran out of business?
And
But
also,
what if
dude,
it's something like there was this
I mean,
case
even
in
if
the
you're not
90s, I
arrested, you
believe,
get-
with honey, where there was stuff in the honey that was making people sick, but it was doing it slow enough to the point where they never connected it.
But they connected it.
Well, they
didn't
can probably
They
go
would
to the
start doing an
doctor.
investigation.
The fact that they
yeah.
know it was the honey means that
I'll buy off the investigators.
dude, are you serious?
Then everyone would know.
You think there will be no need for this in the society that we're talking about? Investigators, privatized investigators who would
What if I could
profit
just
by
buy them
solving
off?
things like
What if
this?
Dude, eventually they would find out.
Called PIs.
Dude, they would eventually find out that what's going on in the food, and your business would go out of your company would go out of business because people will say, "I don't want to eat this food. This is terrible. This is gonna kill me."
Okay, well then I'll
And
change
not only
names
that,
and
you'd,
go to some other
you'd get
state.
a lot worse. No one would want to hire you. You'd
Actually,
practically be
no.
broke.
Well, if they
Yeah,
find out,
nobody would. They would recognize your face, dude.
I'll grow a beard. I'll get some plastic surgery. I don't know.
yeah, and that's the main problem when it comes to arguments against anarcho-capitalism from just a general statist perspective, is that you need to jump to ridiculous hyperbole and just scenarios where if one little thing went wrong, well, then that criticism wouldn't be valid. It's just, it gets to the point where, I mean, yeah, that could happen, but it's not going to. Because you're at this point, you're saying that you're going to buy off every single person who is a private investigator. You're
What if
going
I just buy off enough to the point? What if I buy off the big ones? Like, say I buy off, the ones that anyone's going to hear. Because obviously, no one's going to hear every single private investigator.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. You can, there are other private investigators, and keep in mind that the media in this world doesn't really have an interest in being bought off. It has an interest in having people read it. So a story where somebody is poisoning the food, well, everyone is going to want to read that. And if a PI finds that and leaks it to the media, well, then it doesn't matter how small the PI is. The fact of the matter is that the information is available.
I'll buy off the media then.
How are you gonna do that, dude?
Again,
What
Anybody-
company
like
do
how
you
he
think is gonna?
acts.
How are you gonna be making all this money? How are you gonna
Yeah,
be
you kind
making
of
all
act
this
like you have
money? Who?
infinite money.
Yeah.
In a super competitive atmosphere.
Plus,
Yeah, and-
what makes you think that every single business would let you take over their business? Because
That's-
not every business that has a money on the table will always take that deal because they know they're business smart, that they'll just keep their own business.
Well, no, like we'll say, okay, fine. I guess I'd have to wait to start poisoning my food. I guess I'll have to wait a few years. What if I get so big that I
And then
can't
another
do that
question.
and buy off all the media?
How would you get so big though?
Ephrom, another question though.
Not poison the food for multiple years.
Then what would make you
Okay, but what
choose
would be
to
the point of
poison the
poisoning
food?
it in the first place, too?
Yeah,
I
you're
don't know, maybe it's
profitable. Why
cheaper.
would you poison millions of people?
Maybe it's cheaper. Maybe I realize I hate everyone. I don't know.
Okay,
But wait, why
why
would you
couldn't a
add
psychopath
poison?
do that now?
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing really, when you get down to it is, well, that's the point, is that it can happen now. So using that as an argument against anarchism is kind of retarded. It's more of an argument against society than anything else, and you're not really going to get around the fact that there's a society unless you're an anarcho-primitivist, in which case no one's going to take you seriously anyway.
Well, no, here's the other thing. Because a lot of people seem to argue that monopolies can't form under pure capitalism, which
No,
is
they can't. The concept
it's technically the case. If you look at the very literal definition of the monopoly, then
Yeah,
yes.
technically possible, but the fact of the matter is that it's only hypothetically possible. It literally
What
cannot
about
happen
Standard Oil then?
unless a company were to find out a way to please every single person and every single demographic. Which one thing that's literally not possible because there are demographics which.
What if I expand then? What if I expand out?
One another. Secondly, even if that were the case, if the company were to form a monopoly in a free market, well, then nobody would be complaining because in order for that to happen, you would have to please all of your customers.
Well, no, I'm sorry, but look at what Standard Oil did back in the, I forget exactly when, but it was in the 18th or the 19th century. My bad. It was the company John D. Rockefeller ran. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking
I
about.
think so.
What about it?
Okay. If you remember, I think John D. Rockefeller got so rich he was able to sell his oil at a point where he'd lose money because he had so much of it.
Yeah, and that's stupid because the point of selling and competing is to gain capital. So if he's selling at a rate which he is losing money, well, then there would
But
be
he
no
was still the richest man who ever lived in American history.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was losing money. So
And he
What-
still
what
had
would be-
enough of it to be considered the
what
richest
would be
man in
the
American
point of-
history. How much did he have when he died? Adjusted for
And
inflation.
did he take over every company and shut everyone out of business and destroy everybody? No, he just got rich and ran a business, and there are still other businesses cropping up around him.
Yeah, and a lot of them went out of business because they couldn't compete with John D. Rockefeller's prices because, again, he had so much money, he could sell to the point where he was losing it.
Yeah, and then eventually, when all the other companies would run out of business, well, then he'd have to raise the prices again, or else he would go out of business, because that's unsustainable to sell your gas or your oil at a price where you are losing money. So he has to raise his money back up again. Oh, well, then there's competitors again, because he's selling it at a competitive rate.
Yeah, I believe that's what he did when there was very little competition left, is that he was able to raise his prices back to where he was making a profit. That's what he did when there was competition surfing up. What he did when there was competition that was surfacing, he was able to make it so low that he was losing money.
Yeah, but then he had to raise it up again because and then when he had to raise it up again, competitors would form.
That
was
when
not
they
a
got
monopoly.
big enough to the point where they were a threat, he lowered the prices again.
But then he would have to raise them again because that's an unsustainable rate of selling.
Well, yeah, but he done it to do it for a temporary amount of time, because at some point, when you're the richest man in America,
yeah, but the
no
argument,
one else is.
The thing we're arguing here is if he established a monopoly or not, and we've determined basically that he did not establish a monopoly because it was not possible for him to do so in a free market, at least. Now, that was not by any means a capitalist market, since when Rockefeller was doing this, there was still taxation and trade tariffs, so it was still very mercantilistic, corporatist to an extent. But to argue that it was the way it is now is ludicrous as well. We'll just call it a freer market than it is now.
Okay. Well, what would you argue is the perfect example of your theory working out?
Perfect example? Well, there has been none. There's never been a society where all ownership is private and all decisions are determined by private and voluntarily agreed upon terms. So there is no historical example. The closest thing to a historical example would be medieval Iceland from the year 980 to 1250. And even then, that was still a very statist society. It was a confederate government, but just about everything was private.
Well, yeah, but okay. Well, would you say medieval Iceland flourished, in your opinion?
Yes, it did. It flourished. The reason why, ironically, the reason why the society collapsed was because the government started to fight itself. So the society flourished when everything was private and when the government, was sticking to itself. But then the government naturally, like all governments do, it wanted a little more, and then that caused the society to collapse. So statism killed that too.
Well, would you say Iceland is in any way flourishing right now?
I would say that I'm not exactly sure how their financial state is right now exactly.
I don't know. Is anyone from Iceland in the chat? If so, please tell us.
Probably not. They've only got like 800,000. They've got a population of about 800,000 in the whole country, so probably not.
Okay. Because actually, one of the main things Iceland did was it had a similar economic crash to the one in the U.S., and it actually prosecuted the bankers who were behind it.
Wait, which economic crash are you talking about?
The economic crash of 2008. Iceland had a similar one, but it prosecuted the people behind it.
Yeah, and the economic crash of 2008, though, was not... I'm not very familiar with Iceland's crash, but the crash of 2008 was not caused by bankers. It was caused by the fact that banks could just take loans from the Federal Reserve, and they weren't bound by their deposits anymore. It's the same reason that the Great Depression happened.
Well, couldn't the federal government have stepped in at some point and told them to stop doing that?
I suppose they could have, but they won't, because that's literally the entire fucking point of the Federal Reserve, is to give people loans when they don't have any money.
Yeah, but here's my question. why couldn't, because another main thing, because if you're going to talk about the Great Depression, one of the main ways money was lost was due to bad banking investments, which a government could have stepped in and said, stop doing that at any time.
No, it wasn't. It was caused by the discount rate in 1929 being raised to 12%, which basically cut off money from the market. That's what caused it to begin with, and that had nothing to do with the economy. That had to do with Herbert Hoover's absolutely fucking insane idea that he should just bail out companies that are failing.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. That was a horrible idea, and we shouldn't have corporate welfare, by the way, just to make that clear.
I'm sure that you agree with welfare for individual citizens, though. Am I right?
Yeah, I will admit the welfare system does need some reform. I'll gladly admit that right now.
Right, so you shouldn't steal money and use it to bail out bankers, but you should steal money and use it to bail out private individuals. So,
well, no, how do you know it's a full bailout? How do you know they actually were born unlucky in a poor scenario and it had nothing to do with them?
Because that's not what happens in this country. 90%, over 90% of people who are born poor eventually end up wealthy later in life. That was shown by a Pew Research study, and also this is self-evident that poverty is caused by poor financial decisions when you look at the fact, when you just simply look at the people who won the lottery. Most of the people who play the lottery are incredibly poor, and over a vast majority of the people who win the lottery do not keep their money. That is because poverty is caused by poor financial decisions. So that may be a hard reality, but this idea that people are born poor and then they stay poor and there's no wealth mobility is just nonsense.
Well, no, I'm not arguing there's no wealth mobility. I'm saying that there are some people who can't get to wealth mobility due to other reasons. Like, say they were born disabled.
They gamble and they drink.
No, I'm saying, like, say someone is born disabled and they can't find a job because they are born, I don't know, paraplegic, for instance.
Okay, I'm sorry, what was that? Listen to reason, like halfway cut you off there.
Okay, basically, like, say someone's born paraplegic, okay?
Right, there's plenty.
And they couldn't find a job.
Well, no, there's plenty of jobs.
The question was, what are the reasons? That's what I said.
You know, not every job has you climbing a ladder. I mean, there's plenty of jobs for people who are paraplegic.
Okay, well, what if they... Well, no, just disabilities in general. Like, say some people, you know, can't have their arms work correctly, for instance.
What do they do now? They get a prosthetic and a job.
What if they're unable to get... Because, again, we're talking about an anarcho-capitalist society. What if we say, okay, we'll do it, but you got to give us $100,000 first?
Well, you're also forgetting about private charities, which would exist in an anarcho-capitalist society. And don't try and say, oh, well, private charities are unreliable. No, they're fucking not. Not only
private charities' main issue is that they are run like a business
society. Even in the current society, these private charities bring in billions upon billions of dollars. Not only that, but the people who have the most money give the most money to charities, like Bill Gates, for example, to his autism charities. So, I mean, the idea that in a society where there are no safety blankets, so there's an even greater reason to be sympathetic of people who are paraplegic, that there would be less people giving to charity, I just find that hard to believe.
Well, the problem is charities are run a lot like a business, and they rely a lot on propaganda, like Autism Speaks, for instance. You know how many people still donate to Autism Speaks?
Yeah, and do you know how many other charities don't fucking work like Autism Speaks?
You want to know how many of them are as well known as Autism Speaks?
Right there. You cherry picked a
Let's
bad
see.
example. Plus, that's not even the only. It's not even the only autism charity. You know, there's more charities
okay.
than autism.
Okay, esoteric entity. Name me
and that's just-
one autism charity that's as well known as Autism Speaks right now. I dare you.
I'm looking them up. Autism.
Are you asking him to name another charity? There's like hundreds of them. Are you
That's
kidding
the
me?
point, though. You had to look them up.
No, but there's a bunch of
Okay.
them. There's a lot
You
of
have to
them
look
that
up
are
anything.
incredibly well known.
No,
and they're all
Autism Speaks
privately
is
owned.
factually the most well-known autism charity, and they're
No, it's
horrible
not.
people.
It's the one that's well known because it's a fucking meme because of how hilariously misleading their misinformation is. The fact of the matter is that there are plenty of autism charities which pull in just as much or more money than Autism Speaks.
Okay, well, let's see how much.
Hey, while he's looking that up, you want to put a wrench on Voluntaris since he's in the chat, just so he has something to do.
I've been trying, but he's not. I'm doing like that's why I'm quiet
Yeah,
most of the
he's-
time, so I can try to figure this out.
He's
So
having
practically,
issues
I'm
with
not here. I'm
his
just in the
technology at the
corner.
moment.
I mean, a lot of people don't know that the Salvation Army lobbies against LGBT rights.
Okay. Well, what does that have to do with their services?
It means that if you are donating to the Salvation Army, yeah, you could be donating to some guy's meal, but you could also be donating against your gay friend's right to get married.
What are they doing against gay people? What are I mean, yeah, they take a stance against LGBT groups, whatever. That doesn't mean that they're actively fighting against LGBT groups or gay rights legislation. So name me one piece of legislation by the Salvation Army that is anti-gay.
Well, let's see. I'm going to look up, because I know they use a lot of money to lobby against it.
Well, if you're talking about like I don't know. I guess I'll assume that you're talking about private businesses being forced.
Okay, here's some. 1986, the Salvation Army of New Zealand collection signatured against the Homosexual Law Reinforcement Act, which replaced
That
law
was in New
criminalization
Zealand, and that was 30 years ago. You can't find a more recent example.
2012.
Happened.
Wait, we're talking about lobbying. Would lobbying even be a thing in an anarcho-capitalistic state?
Well, no, because that would require politics, and there wouldn't be any.
So,
So
sounds irrelevant to
More
me.
recent example, 2012, the Salvation Army of Burlington, Vermont, allegedly fired because worker Daniel, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, immediately after discovering she was bisexual. The church's employees handbook reads, in part, the Salvation Army does not reserve the right to make employee decisions on the basis of employee conduct or behavior that is incapable with the principle of the Salvation Army. Later, the year spokesman Major George Hart reaffirmed the church's anti-gay beliefs, saying a relationship between same-sex individuals is a personal choice that people have the right to make. But from this church's viewpoint, we see that going against the will of God. Right there.
what year was this again?
2012.
Okay, 2012. Well, it sounds like it has more to do with their affiliation to the church than anything. And honestly, they're a private charity, so they can hire whoever they want.
Well, I'm not denying that. What I'm denying is the fact that a lot of people don't seem to know that. A lot of people don't know that fact.
Okay, well, it seems that a lot of people, it's probably not the first thing on their mind when they're giving to the Salvation Army. I'm thinking about giving to the Salvation Army, but what is their policy on gays? How do they treat gay people? Hold on a
Well,
second.
I'm arguing I don't think a lot of people seem to know about that. You're arguing that a lot of people don't seem to think that matters.
Thanks
That's a
for telling
very
us.
different argument.
Well,
It
it's
doesn't
because
matter in the context of this discussion.
the reason why I'm saying that a lot of people don't care is because the Salvation Army is not a charity which specifies in LGBT groups or LGBT rights. It's for just general poverty or military cases. Like military charity, poverty of whatever kind. So I meant like homeless veterans, but whatever. That's aside from the point. The point is that they aren't a charity which deals specifically with LGBT rights. So it's sort of aside from the point. But the fact of the matter, when it comes to private charity, is that unlike welfare or unlike social programs where there are specific quotas set up by the government for people to qualify, and then they don't even question this, and that's based mainly on what they sign on their forums. Here, private charities can selectively choose who receive their treatment, so there are no scabs. There's no possibility for somebody to be a scab off the system. So it's genuinely going to people who are paraplegics and are disabled and having a hard time getting a job. It's not going to a bunch of drug-addicted losers who sit in their mom's basement all day and play video games.
No, here's the thing. Do you have any citations that show that that's even I'll say more than 2%?
Because it's how fucking private charities work. I don't need a citation.
No, show me the proof that that's even the majority of people on welfare.
Show me the majority. Okay.
I'm just asking, is everybody else getting a little bit of lag in here?
I'm
Just a little bit.
I don't notice any
Not
much.
much.
I don't notice a very big of a difference.
I just feel so bad because I'm not talking, and it's because I'm trying to get volunteers in here before we end the whole stream. So I'm sorry that I'm here, I'm not talking, but.
There, I found a citation. I'll put it in the side chat here on the.
okay, let's see.
So yes, that is the case. People who are work eligible and are receiving welfare are not working.
Okay, well, let's see. Heritage. Someone. Oh wait, no, that's not you. That's someone else.
But
Okay, Medium.com. Let's do a little Google on them just to see if they've gotten to anything.
it doesn't matter what their bias is. The fact of the matter is you got to use. I just gave you a source, and the information provided in the source is what's relevant here, not the fucking ideology of the website that's hosting that article.
Okay, let's see.
You know, people oppose CNN or MSNBC not because they're left wing, but because their sources are bullshit. You know, the Young Turks isn't particularly establishment either, but, you know, people don't like them because they're bullshit, and they have the same fucking narrative that these mainstream media outlets do.
They're basically cheerleaders.
Well, moving on from that, I guess.
This is showing how government regulation actually took people off of welfare. But okay.
No, it's not, but okay, whatever. But
Regulation of the welfare industry, my bad.
well, okay, whatever. Facts. What other parts of anarcho-capitalism do you want to discuss?
The other thing I wanted to discuss was the ideology of a living wage under my society, because I personally do feel that if you are working a full-time job, you should be entitled to enough money to at least have a very basic living condition. Not anything much, but still, you put in the bare minimum, you get the bare minimum, basically.
Okay, well, aside from the fact that that's based on the idea that without a minimum wage, that there would just people would just simply make nothing. That's simply not true. There are countries in Europe like Switzerland who currently do not have a minimum wage. Not only do they not have a minimum wage, but they're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And people, they tried.
Actually, I think I saw Bad Mouse mention this once.
They tried to vote for a minimum. Bad Mouse as oh god. Oh man.
The banking system in Switzerland actually gives them a step up above everyone else. And not only that, but I think it's actually a relatively small country. Let me see.
Okay, well, aside from the example, the fact of the matter is is that wage is not determined simply by it's not determined by an arbitrary standard. Wage is determined by the equilibrium created by the supply and demand curve of an industry. So, which is the amount of jobs available and the amount of money companies are producing and the amount of workers available and the amount of supply that's being shipped to be sold, the commodities that are being sold. So the idea that there needs to be a minimum wage is just absolute nonsense. But move from that aside, again, this is the idea that rights exist in a positive context. So when you say that you're entitled to a wage, what you're suggesting is that you have the right to demand something which you have no right to, because of it's mainly because of that perception of rights.
Wait a minute, I'm gonna bring this up real quick. Upon adjusting for population, it turns out that Switzerland and Norway have pretty much the same GDP.
And there are other things to
Just real quick.
well, there are other things to measure an economy's growth other than GDP, but yes, Switzerland doesn't have a minimum wage. But back to what I was saying really quickly.
Just figured that was at least worth mentioning.
Any concept of rights that does not inherently stem from anything that inherently stems from anything which is not life or autonomy will always violate someone else's life or autonomy. For example, the negative rights of freedom of speech would be that you have the freedom to speak and nothing more. If viewing the concept to speak from a positive context, well, then you would see that you have the right to demand that an audience listens to you as well as being able to speak. And does that sound justified? No, because it violates people's freedom of movement and freedom of choice, which stems from autonomy.
But how dare YouTube demonetize my videos? Sorry,
Yeah,
that was a side thing.
YouTube is crap right now. I mean, I'm getting quite a few of my videos demonetized too, but
That was just a little side thing. But on a side note, can I just say, anyone who claims to be for capitalism but was against YouTube demonetizing their videos is a complete hypocrite on every level.
How?
Because they claim they're fine with freedom and free markets, so they don't want the market to, but they don't want that company to say, I don't want to advertise on that guy's videos because I don't agree with him.
if
When
you
that
can't
is
criticize a
freedom of
company, well, then
association.
how is the market supposed to regulate itself?
Well, no, you can criticize companies, but the company doesn't have to sponsor you.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the point. They're criticizing companies because
And I was calling the people who didn't understand that hypocrites, but when they were claiming to also be ANCAPs or libertarians, in the case of someone like Paul Joseph Watson, who
Well,
contradicts.
that's the thing. It's
But
not.
Google's not being capitalistic. They're trying to follow a moral code.
So
Yeah,
moral
That's the
codes
problem. If they
can't
were just
exist in
going after the
capitalism.
money, they would have no problem with taking money from advertising on the large YouTube channels and the skeptic community's channels.
That's
It's
the
because
other
they're
thing.
following a moral code. That's the problem.
The people who are complaining about the advertising on YouTube, well, they're not complaining about YouTube having the ability. Well, yeah, they're complaining that YouTube is doing it, but they're not complaining about YouTube having the ability to do that. Criticizing a company for acting poorly is actually, capitalism could not work if people didn't do that.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying the people who didn't understand that were hypocrites. That's it. Sorry about that little side thing.
Yeah, well, let's get I actually have a point to bring up with you. So you as we've established, you believe in statism, and a fundamental belief of your ideology is absolute it's the idea that people are just inherently bad and are going to screw each other over. Establish that belief. But why in the hell then do you believe that there should be a government to govern over people, when that a government is an organization which is explicitly designed to use force. If you believe that people are just a bunch of nasty, self-serving monsters, well then why is it that you support a government?
Because every other time a government has been completely gotten rid of, it ended up creating a system where it is impossible for good people to rise above, because people who rose above were warlords.
Well, again, that's the problem with social anarchism, and if you examine how systems like revolutionary Catalonia function, that's an example of an anarcho-syndicalist society, I believe. It did not even function like an anarchist society. They would murder people for engaging in exchange that they didn't agree with. They had a fucking border. Which,
well, no, I'm going back to post-Hussein Iraq and post-Guamafe Libya.
Okay.
Again, those societies got rid of a government. Warlords happened.
No, they got rid of their society as well. An anarchist society is not a society. It's not in existence without a society. An anarchist society is simply a existence without rulers. That's literally what anarchism means. So that's mainly my question, though, is that's just a destabilized society. But what my question originally was getting at is, you believe that people are just inherently bad to one another.
I don't necessarily believe that, but okay.
Well, that's why you support a government, because you think without one that everyone is just gonna fuck each other over. So
no, I don't think everyone is going to. I think the worst people are going to get the ability to, and have no way for anyone to stop them.
Right. So logically following that, you'd think that you would be in support of individualist anarchism, because that makes it so there isn't a system in place which inherently rewards that kind of behavior, as opposed to statism, where it literally establishes a society where there is an organization, a corporation, which is supposed to use force on peaceful people. So, I mean, the statist ideology is absolute lunacy.
Well, no, first off, you're assuming that I want the government to use force on peaceful people. My idea of a government is not one that uses force on necessarily peaceful people. It's one that only uses force on people who, are actually using force against people who can't defend themselves.
Well, that's the problem with that, though, is that a government is an organization which is inherently designed to use force. It has nothing. It can't produce anything, and so how it goes about gaining the ability to do things is forcing everybody to be its shareholders at gunpoint, and then taking over the market and establishing what is essentially complete dominance. We have. I'm not going to argue that the United States is the freest society in the world, because that's self-evident. But even with this being the freest society in the world, we have a government which has essentially established complete dominance over the market and society. And we could talk about other countries as well, but it's not really helping your case to do that. So I assume that we just won't do that.
Well, no, other countries have actually. Well, no, other countries have been able to create societies that have very little laws in terms of using force against peaceful people, that have still managed. Well, okay, what do you define as force?
Anything which violates one's life or autonomy.
So you consider things like taxes force, I assume?
Yes, taxation is extortion. So of course I consider that to be an initiation of force.
How is that not an appeal to emotion, by the way?
because I'm
No,
literally
tell me, Ephrom. I got a question for you. If it wasn't using force, then tell me what would happen if you stopped paying your taxes.
well, just really quickly, it's not an appeal to emotion, because an appeal to emotion is where you simply your argument is entirely based on an emotional argument, and there's no logic, there's no reason behind it. It's simply emotion. Well, the fact of the matter is that extortion is using aggression, using
Well, I brought this up earlier.
violently stealing something from somebody, and that's exactly what taxation is. You pay your taxes, or else the government is going to come and throw you in a cage, and if you resist, well, then they'll kill you.
Well, no, this is something that I brought up earlier, but if property rights were to exist, why do those property rights not apply to a government?
Because the government is not an entity. The belief in government is the only thing that exists. The government itself does not exist. And the thing is, though, is that
Okay,
again,
wait, could you explain that, please? 'Cause that doesn't make any sense.
okay, well, without statism, without the belief in government, a government would not exist. The only thing that makes it exist is the fact that a bunch of statists have come together and said that there needs to be a body of ruling class people who dictate over society.
Well, what is stopping me from
So-
saying that towards a landlord then?
Saying what towards a landlord? What
Just
specifically?
saying, hey, your authority doesn't exist.
You entered into an agreement with the landlord. I was born in America. I didn't enter into any agreement to pay taxes. I just was born into it, and they'll put me in jail if I don't.
Yeah, that's another part of it, is I never, you never agreed. They call it a social contract, but the concept of a social contract is bullshit because you never agreed to it, so it's not a contract.
And that's that.
Well, then Okay, so by that same logic, would I be able to force, say I was a landlord and the person who was renting a house of mine had kids? Would they be allowed to live in that house and not pay rent as they were born in that house?
I got to go do something really quickly. Can you guys answer that question as well as listen to Reason asking your question again? All right, I'll be back in like 5 minutes.
The question was already answered, but at the same time, so ask your question again, because I'd like to hear it again.
What I'm talking about is, if by that same logic, say I was a landlord and, the person who was renting a house of mine had a kid, because they did not enter into a contract with me, would I be allowed to have that kid pay rent when they became old enough? Or raise the
Yes,
rent?
that would basically be the gist of it.
But they didn't agree to be born in that house, they just were.
If they live in that house and it's your property, yes, they do need to pay if you're having a contract. Otherwise, it's still your property and you can evict them.
Okay, so why can't the government evict you for not paying taxes or kick you out for not paying taxes?
Because the government doesn't own America, it doesn't own the soil I stand on. I do.
Legally speaking, it does.
All right, Max. Sorry, it's a
Legally speaking, the government does own the property.
But legally, that means that the government is owning it, and the government has its rights. But then again, the government, as we said, is not an individual entity.
Okay.
Well, that's known as an appeal to law. Why do they own it? Well, because they own it. Because they legally they've given themselves the ability to own it. But the fact of the matter is, it's owned privately by the people who have agreed to exchange the land or, homesteaded it.
Wouldn't the Louisiana Purchase actually mean that they do own a good amount of land?
What do you mean?
Saying.
Who's they? The government or?
Yes.
People? Well, the thing is, that's not legitimate because they went in there and they fucking killed everybody and took it over. So that would not count as a voluntary exchange. So no, that's not legitimate.
Okay, well, but it was voluntary in the sense that people who owned that land gave Thomas Jefferson that land.
It was not voluntary in any way. They went in there and they fucking killed anybody who was on that land, and then they took over the land and claimed it as part of the United States.
I don't think that was the case for the Louisiana Purchase. That was the case a couple of times, but the Louisiana Purchase was not one of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could be thinking of something else, but I'm pretty sure that was how the Louisiana Purchase worked out.
You might be thinking of you could be thinking of the Trail of Tears, but I don't think we were discovering new. We might have been.
No, I'm pretty sure it was the Louisiana Purchase. I know it was the Trail of Tears as well, but does anyone here know for sure? Or
yeah, no, the Louisiana Purchase was the French selling that land to the United States.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I doubt it was the Spain. I think it was the French.
Okay.
It was the French.
All right.
But in any case, there's a huge difference between annexing a large swath of uninhabited land and taking.
You also got to remember that.
I mean, it's two different levels.
The money that they used to sell that land, that wasn't their money. They collected that through taxation. So even if it wasn't them going over and brutally conquering the land, well, it still is basically the same principle that they used force to take it.
Well, no, I'm still asking what separates a government from a landlord, because the best answer you guys have been able to give me is simply, well, the government doesn't exist.
Because with a landlord, okay, well, fine, I'll explain it in a simpler way. With the landlord, you engage in a voluntary contract with him. And with the government, you don't. The government tells you what to do, and you do it, or you get thrown in jail or killed if you don't want to go to jail. Like, for example, Trump's wall down on the southern border. He is forcing people to give up part of their property and offering money in compensation. But the fact of the matter is that they don't have a choice in the matter. They're either
here's a question. Would borders exist in a narco-capitalist society?
No, because borders and restrictions require, first of all, that requires a government, and secondly, that is a violation of a person's free movement, which is a violation of individual autonomy. Which
so it's a violation of my free movement to be told I can't go on that person's private property for X reason, or restraining orders, for instance, violations of my freedom of movement.
Well, because you're infringing on their right to autonomy, because that's where property rights stem from, is individual autonomy, the use of material resource to develop the ability to create property and to do what you want with your resources. To restrict that right would be a violation of autonomy. So yes, you would be infringing on somebody's rights by going on their property.
Okay, so why does that not apply to borders?
Well, because for one thing, borders are owned by a state, and secondly, yeah, it's not violating anyone's individual autonomy. Well, it's violating their autonomy to keep them out, but the land entirely within a government is not privately owned by anybody. It was not gained through someone's material resources, because as explained, the government is not capable of actually producing anything. So,
well, actually, it's been proven to be, in the case of healthcare, again, countries with single-payer systems.
Dude, you're kind of echoing.
no,
I think I may have. Again, about 30 countries live longer than the United States. all of them have some form of single payer. Actually, 28 is tied, 29. So 32.
And we went over in the past.
Wasn't the
that
subject borders?
Yeah, that's an appeal to popularity. Oh, other countries have it, so it would be good if we had it.
No, that's closer to saying, hey, they're living longer.
Dude,
Maybe
no,
we should do.
No, because what
Dude.
your argument is, it's not that they're living longer; it's that they have it. And
I
because
just
they
said
have
they
it,
live longer.
Dude, if you were to look at what they have, what they eat, you would
And
see
they-
that physically we are different people.
Yeah,
As a
and
result, there are gonna be people saying, "Oh, he's gonna live longer because he eats this way." People over there are gonna live less because they eat that way.
yeah, and again, you haven't proven that there's a direct correlation between healthcare and people living longer. You know, there's a great deal of natural selection in the development of people depending on the region that they come from. For example, people from northern Scandinavia, they have sort of a bigger set of brows than people from the United States. So there are physical differences based on simply how people, the region that they're from, and their natural climate. So, I mean, my point is not that people are different, whatever. My point and bottom line is that there are so many different factors between the United States or Scandinavia that saying that the longer lifespans of people in Scandinavian countries has to do with healthcare, it's a non-argument, because there's no way you can claim that. Especially when you take into account that their healthcare in the countries that have socialized healthcare, because I'm aware that not all Scandinavian countries have socialized healthcare.
I think the only one I'm aware of that doesn't have any form of socialized healthcare is, I believe, Switzerland, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you take into account that their healthcare is of poorer quality than private healthcare, well, then it's an impossibility that what is making them live longer.
Well, no, I mean, again, we just had a guy in the chat not too long ago, Shelly D, say that, yeah, the Canadian healthcare system works.
And I believe I provided a link proving that that's not the case, what he was claiming.
And he lives in Canada,
And
and
plus,
talking about their
there have
healthcare
been multiple videos done on this that are showing that that is not true, that it doesn't work quite as well. Even Louder with Crowder did one recently, or about maybe half a year ago. He went there, he showed where the line starts, he explained it, and why are you laughing?
Steven Crowder, really? Really?
Well, you're willing to bring up Young Turks and all that. I mean, I've seen your videos, so
Yeah, and I
that's
mean,
why I can't bring up other people.
As we've explained, it really doesn't matter who is presenting the evidence. The fact of the matter is the evidence being presented. When you're arguing over the evidence, that's all that's important.
Well, you were laughing at me when I brought up Bad Mouse, so.
Yeah, that's because Bad Mouse is an idiot who thinks that anarchism is synonymous with communism. So.
And Steven Crowder doesn't know that there was nearly a recession in the 1990s because of Reaganomics.
Yeah, and I mean, there's problems with
what does that have to do with the argument?
some of the stuff he said too. Okay, yeah, that's a stupid position, but the fact of the matter is that we're not talking about his position on Reaganomics. We're talking about him exposing the Canadian healthcare system.
Okay, well, again. Okay, well, there. It's officially one Canadian versus one Canadian. Now, if we can find a second one, we'll get somewhere.
Dude, let me ask you this. Would you make the same argument for the UK? Because the UK has a similar system to Canada. In the UK, you have to wait, and there are people who are physically dying waiting to get their health care.
And they are still living, let's see.
Again, dude, people make different decisions. You can be a smoker here in the United States, and chances are you're gonna live less. You're gonna live less compared to someone.
I don't think cigarettes are banned in the UK or Canada, but I'm gonna double check that.
God, dude.
Feel like you're missing the point on that one, but please do the research, buddy.
I'm just saying. Okay, smoking. No, it's legal to smoke in Canada in your own house, but
Okay, well that wasn't the point, but
I know
mean,
just that particular exam had one.
I mean, we're talking about a life expectancy fluctuation of what, 2, 3, 4 years here, right?
Yes. Well, actually, well, yeah, but let's see. Japan has about a 7-year life expectancy, or 7-year longer one. I'd say that's at least worth looking into.
My point is that fluctuation isn't enough to prove a correlation with socialized healthcare.
Well, okay. Well, how much would you say it is? How much fluctuation would you say so?
If I could see a 10 to 15% or a 10 to 15-year fluctuation between the U.S. and Canada, then yeah, I'd say there's something to that healthcare system. But 3 years over the course of a 60 to 70-year lifetime, that could be environment. That could be due to a number of factors. That's just too small of a. It's a non-factor. To me, it looks pretty competitive. 3 years, it's pretty good. Not to mention the fact that we've been living on private healthcare for 200 years before 5 years ago.
Here's the thing, though. Here's another thing, by the way. All of these
How have we
companies,
thrived if without socialized healthcare, all these people are going to die?
all these countries, though, at some point did have a privatized healthcare system, and a lot of them got rid of it.
Dude, that's an appeal to popularity. That's not a good argument.
just because they got rid of it doesn't fucking mean that they got rid of it because it was bad. That is a classic appeal to popularity.
Well, no, but the thing is, Pepe guy over there was saying that, oh no, we've survived this long without having, single payer, and I'm saying
because you keep bringing up like the worst case scenario that could happen, and I'm like, when has that happened? We've had it for 200 years. When did the worst case scenario manifest in just millions of deaths? Because we've talked about that.
Let's see.
And that's another big problem with the arguments for single-payer healthcare. It's presented as if you either have single-payer healthcare or you have none. And that's absolutely ridiculous. Like the main argument.
I think the first country to switch to single payer was UK. I could be wrong on that though.
Yeah, and the UK has like.
Just letting you guys know, we are reaching the 1 hour and a half mark.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like 17 minutes away. If you consider that close, fucking freaking me out here. No, we got
It's close enough.
but that's probably one of the worst examples of single-payer healthcare was the UK with their Canada has prioritized waiting lists, but the UK it's way fucking worse than Canada, because in the UK it's pretty much based on identity. So
Actually,
it's not like
citation needed. First off, second off, I remember because I've actually seen a few of you guys' videos, that co-op you did with Hoodie Demon on Secular Talk. You remember that one?
Yeah. What about it?
Okay, because I remember I looked in the comments of it. I'm gonna see if I can find it. And someone from the UK was saying that's not the case. It's only for elective procedures.
Yeah, and I refuted that. I gave him the source that proved it was just for elective procedures, unless it is unless my comment got marked as spam by Google, then it should still be there. So everyone go look at that.
By the way, appeal to emotions are bad, but Kyle Kalinske loves authoritarian healthcare.
How is that an appeal to emotion?
Because authoritarian is an inherently negative word and makes people think, oh God, authoritarianism, that's bad.
No, it's not, because there are people who identify as authoritarians. It's not an inherently negative trait.
Okay, well, the way you're using it has always been negative. The way any anarcho-capitalist uses it is negative. You cannot deny the emotion that responds when you hear someone say authoritarian is negative.
Well, I mean, the other thing is he's advocating for an authoritarian healthcare system. It's not an inaccurate description. I mean, at worst, it's clickbaity bullshit, but it is not a appeal to emotion. It's not an inaccurate title. So, does anyone have anything more that they'd like to talk about here?
Is there any more arguments to refute at the moment?
Well, I made it. How long did I make it without bringing up roads? About an hour 15. Huh. I defied all of your expectations.
I actually didn't expect you to bring up roads, since the majority of your videos on your channel are about healthcare. I expected that to be the main focus of the debate. Yeah, I mean, it takes a particular lack of understanding of anarcho-capitalism to bring up the roads argument. So, I mean, so we'll put it like that I had some faith in your arguments.
Yeah, I was not going to bother with that because most of those arguments are inherently stupid. Yeah,
they're incredibly lowbrow, and all they do is demonstrate a lack of understanding of libertarianism. But anyway. Well,
by the way, Hoodie Demon gave you 20 bucks. Was that Hoodie Demon? No, that's not. It's Lucas Martiz.
I didn't. Well, thanks, man. I didn't even see that because I wasn't looking at the chat. But let's.
I've been looking at the chat on and off tonight.
You did that now. Here's some money for a great man. Well, thank you so much for the donation, Lucas Martinez. Greatly appreciated. Well, I guess we'll end it here. I will. Okay. Guys, next time.